The year was 2389. Humanity had crossed hundreds of star systems, built cities beneath crimson skies, and learned that the universe was far stranger than anyone had imagined. Yet despite all those discoveries, humanity had never encountered intelligent alien life, until now. Lieutenant Ethan Cross stood alone on the observation deck of the exploration vessel Horizon. Beyond the massive viewport stretched an endless sea of stars. The ship drifted at the edge of an uncharted region of space known only as Sector XJ117. A mysterious signal had been detected there. Not natural, not human, something else. Ethan folded his arms and stared at the display. "Please tell me this isn't another abandoned probe," he said. Commander Reyes shook her head. "I'm afraid not." Ethan glanced over. "Afraid? The signal is responding to us." The bridge became completely silent. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. For over 200 years, humanity had searched for proof that it wasn't alone in the universe. Now something was answering back. Moments later, space itself began to change. A brilliant blue light appeared ahead of the horizon. The stars seemed to bend around it. Then reality folded inward. An enormous vessel emerged from the distortion. It was unlike anything humanity had ever built. The alien craft appeared almost alive. Its surface shimmered like liquid crystal beneath starlight. No visible engines, no visible weapons, no visible seams, only smooth curves and flowing silver light. The bridge crew watched in stunned silence. Then every screen aboard the Horizon flickered. The transmission changed. The ship's translators began working furiously. After several tense seconds, a single sentence appeared. "We have waited for you." Nobody spoke. History had just changed forever. 3 days later, Ethan stood inside the Horizon's diplomatic bay, wearing a formal uniform he absolutely hated. He adjusted the collar for what felt like the 100th time. Across from him, the airlock doors slowly opened. A soft blue glow spilled into the room. The alien delegation entered. They were humanoid, tall, graceful. Their skin carried a faint silver-blue glow. Everything about them seemed elegant. Then Ethan saw her. She walked near the center of the group. Dark silver hair flowed over her shoulders. Her eyes shimmered with gold and violet light. She moved with quiet confidence. As she stepped forward, her gaze met Ethan's. For a brief moment, the entire room seemed to disappear. There was only her. The alien woman stopped in front of him. "You are Ethan Cross," she said. Her translator rendered the words perfectly. "I am. I am Lyra of the Vaelari. Welcome aboard the Horizon." Lyra looked around curiously. "Thank you. Your ship is loud." Ethan blinked. "Loud?" "It hums with impatience." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "That sounds human enough." To his surprise, Lyra smiled back. "Then perhaps I will understand humans faster than expected." The following weeks became some of the most important in galactic history. Humans and Vaelari exchanged knowledge. Scientists shared discoveries. Engineers compared technologies. Diplomats negotiated agreements. And through it all, Ethan and Lyra spent nearly every day together. As humanity's liaison officer, Ethan had been tasked with helping her understand human culture. The assignment quickly became much more enjoyable than he expected. One afternoon, he introduced her to coffee. Lyra took a careful sip. Her face immediately twisted with confusion. Ethan nearly laughed. "What do you think?" She stared into the cup. "It tastes like regret." Ethan burst out laughing. "That's probably the most accurate description I've ever heard." "And humans drink this willingly?" "Every morning. Lyra slowly lowered the cup. Your species is deeply concerning. Over time, she became fascinated with humanity. Not just the technology, the people, their music, their art, their stories, their stubborn determination. In return, Lyra shared stories about the Vaelari. She described floating cities suspended above oceans of glowing water, forests made from living crystal, ancient observatories built inside mountains, worlds that seemed almost magical compared to human colonies. The more Ethan learned about her, the more fascinated he became. She was intelligent, compassionate, curious, and surprisingly funny. Weeks became months. Their conversations grew longer, more personal, less formal. One evening, Ethan found Lyra standing alone inside the ship's botanical garden. Artificial moonlight illuminated thousands of plants. She stood quietly among them. Couldn't sleep? Ethan asked. Lyra looked over. We do not sleep exactly as humans do. So that's a no. That is a no. Ethan smiled. Lyra smiled back. A comfortable silence settled between them. Not awkward, not forced. Comfortable. Rare. After several moments, Lyra spoke. Your species surprises me? How? You built machines capable of crossing galaxies. That's impressive, right? She nodded. Then you use them to share videos of small animals falling off furniture. Ethan laughed. Also true. Her laughter joined his. For a few moments, the garden echoed with the sound. Then the silence returned. This time it felt different, softer, more intimate. Lyra looked directly at him, not as a diplomat, not as an alien representative, as Ethan. I'm glad I met you, she said quietly. His heartbeat accelerated. For reasons he couldn't fully explain, those simple words mattered far more than they should have. I'm glad I met you too. Lyra held his gaze for a few seconds longer. Neither of them looked away. Neither of them seemed to want the moment to end. Neither realized just how important that moment would become. Because elsewhere in the galaxy there were people who feared the growing alliance. People who believed humanity and the Vaelari should never coexist. People who saw cooperation as a threat. Months later, those fears exploded into violence. Ethan was reviewing navigation reports when emergency alarms suddenly screamed throughout the horizon. Red warning lights flooded every corridor. Crew members rushed past his office. Report! Ethan shouted. The response came immediately. Emergency transmission from the Serafel research station. Ethan's stomach dropped. Lyra was there. The main screen activated. Smoke filled the image. Parts of the station were burning. Damaged corridors drifted through space beyond shattered viewports. We've been attacked, a voice shouted through static. Multiple hull breaches. We need immediate assistance. Ethan was already moving. Within minutes, rescue shuttles launched from the horizon. As the station grew larger in the viewport, Ethan felt dread tightening inside his chest. Entire sections of the facility were missing. Debris floated everywhere. Fires burned in vacuum-sealed compartments. The moment his shuttle docked, he sprinted inside. Smoke filled the corridors. Emergency lights flashed overhead. Damaged support beams groaned beneath stress. Lyra, he called into his communicator. Nothing. He tried again. Lyra, answer me. For several seconds there was only static, then her voice finally emerged. Weak, distant, alive. Ethan! Relief hit him so hard his knees nearly buckled. Where are you? Observation ring. The corridor collapsed. Stay there, I'm coming. That is unwise. Ethan pushed through another damaged doorway. You've met humans. We specialize in unwise. Despite the danger, he heard a faint laugh through the communicator. Following emergency beacons, Ethan finally reached the observation ring. He found Lyra helping injured scientists despite blood running from a wound near her temple. "You look terrible," he said. She gave him a tired smile. "You say the sweetest things." Ethan moved beside her. "Can you walk?" "Only if you stop looking worried." Together, they guided survivors toward evacuation shuttles. Then the station groaned. The entire structure trembled violently. "That's not good," Ethan muttered. "No," Lyra agreed. "That is extremely not good." A warning klaxon erupted. Structural failure. The observation ring was beginning to separate from the station. Ethan grabbed Lyra's hand. "Run." They sprinted through smoke-filled corridors. Metal screamed around them. The final airlock came into view. Suddenly, a support beam collapsed from above. Ethan shoved Lyra clear but became pinned beneath the wreckage. Pain exploded through his shoulder. "Ethan!" Lyra shouted. "Go!" he yelled. "Get to the shuttle." "No. That's an order. I am not in your chain of command." Despite her injury, Lyra seized the beam and forced it upward. Ethan barely managed to crawl free. Seconds later, they stumbled into the shuttle. Through the viewport, they watched the observation ring tear away from the station and vanish into darkness. Hours later, after rescue operations ended, Ethan found Lyra in the medical bay. Her injury had been treated. She sat quietly beside a window overlooking the stars. When she noticed him, her expression softened. "You came for me." Ethan sat beside her. "Of course I did." "Why?" He stared at the stars for a long moment. Then he answered honestly, "Because losing you wasn't an option." Lyra looked away briefly. When she turned back, her eyes seemed brighter somehow. "You matter to me too, Ethan." Neither spoke after that. They didn't need to. Outside the medical bay, stars drifted endlessly across the darkness. Inside, something had changed between them. Something neither could ignore anymore, and neither realized that their greatest challenge was still waiting ahead. Because somewhere in the shadows, those responsible for the attack were already planning their next move. And next time, they wouldn't settle for merely sending a message. The attack on the Serafel research station changed everything. News of the bombing spread across human and Vaelari space within hours. Entire networks devoted non-stop coverage to the tragedy. Political leaders demanded answers. Military officials demanded retaliation. Ordinary citizens demanded reassurance that peace between the two civilizations was still possible. For Ethan Cross, however, the crisis felt much smaller and much more personal. He stood outside the medical bay, staring through the observation window at Lyra. She was speaking with Vaelari diplomats, but her attention kept drifting toward the stars beyond the glass. Since the attack, something had changed between them. Neither had said the words out loud yet. Neither knew exactly what the future looked like. But both understood that their connection was no longer just friendship. It was becoming something deeper. Something that frightened them almost as much as it inspired them. Several days later, Commander Reyes summoned Ethan to the bridge. "We've received an invitation," she said. Ethan folded his arms. "From who?" "The Vaelari High Council." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "That sounds important." "It is." Reyes activated a display showing a beautiful silver-blue world. Massive oceans covered most of its surface. Brilliant cities sparkled along the coastlines. "Avaris," Reyes said. "Lyra's homeworld." Ethan stared at the image. "They want us to visit?" "Not us," Reyes smiled slightly. "You." Ethan nearly choked. "Why me?" "Because apparently you're becoming very popular with the Vaelari." Ethan sighed. "That sounds dangerous." "It probably is." A week later, the horizon entered orbit around Avaris. Ethan stood beside the viewport as the planet slowly rotated beneath them. Nothing in his career had prepared him for its beauty. Vast crystal forests reflected sunlight like fields of diamonds. Floating cities hovered above oceans that glowed softly beneath the night sky. Towering mountains rose through silver clouds. It looked less like a planet and more like a dream. When Ethan finally stepped onto the surface, Lyra was waiting for him. "Welcome to Avaris," she said. Ethan stared at the floating city behind her. "Your people live here?" "Most of them." "And you grew up here?" "Yes." Ethan shook his head. "That's unfair." Lyra tilted her head. "Unfair? Nobody should get a home this beautiful." She laughed softly. "You have never seen the northern oceans. They're even better?" "Much." Ethan groaned dramatically. "See? Unfair." Over the next several days, Lyra showed him her world. They walked through gardens where luminous flowers bloomed beneath moonlight. They crossed transparent bridges suspended thousands of feet above the sea. They visited ancient observatories built before humanity had even invented electricity. Everywhere they went, Ethan found himself seeing Avaris through Lyra's eyes. It wasn't just beautiful. It was alive with history. One evening, she led him to a quiet cliff overlooking the ocean. 3 moons hung above the horizon. Their reflections shimmered across the water. For several minutes, neither spoke. Finally, Lyra broke the silence. "This was my favorite place when I was young." Ethan glanced around. "I can see why." She smiled faintly. "Whenever I felt uncertain, I came here. And now?" Lyra looked toward the stars. "Now I still do." Ethan nodded. "I know the feeling." The ocean breeze drifted around them. The moment felt strangely peaceful. Then Lyra turned toward him. "May I ask you something?" "Anything." "When you rescued me on Serafel." She hesitated. "Why did you come?" Ethan looked away briefly. The answer felt obvious, yet somehow difficult to say. "Because I was terrified." Lyra blinked. "Terrified?" Ethan nodded. "The thought of losing you scared me more than the station collapsing." For a moment, neither moved, neither breathed. Lyra stared at him with those luminous eyes. Then she stepped closer. "Ethan." Before she could continue, alarms erupted throughout the city. Red warning lights illuminated the skyline. Emergency sirens echoed across the floating platforms. Ethan immediately recognized the sound. Disaster. "What's happening?" he asked. Lyra activated a communication device. Her expression darkened. "A vessel has entered orbit." "Military?" "Stolen military." Ethan's stomach tightened. The extremists had returned. Across the city, defense platforms began activating. Citizens rushed toward shelters. Above them, a massive warship emerged from the clouds. "Tell me that isn't what I think it is," Ethan said. Lyra stared upward. "It is exactly what you think it is." The ship opened fire. Bright streaks of energy descended toward the city. Explosions erupted in the distance. Ethan grabbed Lyra's arm. "We need to move." Together they raced through crowded evacuation corridors. Emergency broadcasts echoed from every direction. The attackers weren't interested in negotiations. They wanted war. They wanted fear. Most importantly, they wanted to destroy the alliance before it could grow stronger. As Ethan and Lyra reached a security center, they received devastating news. The city's defense network had been sabotaged from within. Without it, millions of civilians were vulnerable. "Can it be repaired?" Ethan asked. Lyra studied the tactical display. "Yes." "Then let's do it." "It's not that simple." Ethan frowned. "Why not?" Lyra pointed toward a glowing structure near the city's center. "The network core requires direct activation." Okay. From inside, Ethan followed her gaze. Several explosions erupted nearby. Enemy forces were already converging on the area. Of course it does, he muttered. Lyra almost smiled despite the situation. You continue to demonstrate remarkable optimism. That's not optimism. Ethan checked his equipment. That's denial. Together, they headed toward the core facility. The journey became a desperate race through a city under siege. Smoke filled the air. Emergency vehicles rushed through damaged streets. Citizens helped one another despite the chaos. Again and again, Ethan witnessed humans and Vaelari protecting each other, fighting for each other, refusing to surrender to fear. Eventually, they reached the core chamber. A massive crystal tower stretched upward through the center of the structure. Brilliant energy pulsed beneath its surface. Lyra approached it slowly. Her expression grew serious. There's a problem. Ethan immediately disliked those words. What kind of problem? The activation process requires a biological interface. Meaning? Lyra took a deep breath. Meaning the energy must pass through a living mind. Ethan stared at her. Then realization hit. No. Ethan, no. It may be the only way. Absolutely not. Lyra stepped closer. If the network remains offline, millions could die. Ethan clenched his jaw. We'll find another way. There isn't time. Outside, another explosion shook the facility. Dust drifted from the ceiling. Ethan knew she was right. That didn't make it easier. I don't want to lose you, he said quietly. Lyra's expression softened. For the first time since they met, she looked genuinely vulnerable. And I don't want to lose you. Ethan closed his eyes. Then he walked toward the crystal tower. Then neither of us is doing this alone. Lyra stared at him. Ethan, you said it requires a living mind. He placed his hand against the crystal surface. You've got two. For a moment she looked speechless. Then she smiled. Not the diplomatic smile, not the polite smile. The real one. Together they touched the crystal. Energy surged through the chamber. Light exploded around them. Ethan felt memories rushing through his mind. Not his memories. Lyra's. He saw her childhood, her first journey among the stars, her excitement when she first learned humans existed, her loneliness, her hopes, her fears, and somehow she experienced his memories too. Mars sunsets, academy training, endless years exploring empty space. The first moment he saw her standing in the horizon's diplomatic bay. The connection felt impossible, yet completely natural. Then the defense network awakened. Across Avaris, towers of light erupted toward the sky. A planetary shield formed around the city. Moments later, enemy weapons struck the barrier and shattered harmlessly against it. The attack had failed. Hours later, Ethan woke inside a recovery chamber. The first thing he saw was Lyra sitting beside him. Relief flooded through him immediately. You're alive, he whispered. Lyra smiled. That appears to be the case. Ethan laughed weakly. Good. Good. Very good. For several moments, they simply looked at each other. Then Lyra reached for his hand. There is something I need to tell you. Ethan squeezed her fingers gently. Okay. She took a breath. Among my people, sharing memories is considered the deepest form of trust. Ethan listened quietly. When our minds connected, her voice softened. I saw everything. Ethan's heart skipped. Everything? Lyra nodded. How you felt when we first met. How you worried during the attack. How you looked for me on Seraphel. Ethan laughed nervously. That's slightly embarrassing. Perhaps. Her eyes shimmered beneath the chamber lights. But it was also beautiful. Ethan felt warmth spreading through his chest. Lyra. She leaned closer. I know what you feel. Ethan smiled. Then you know I love you. Silence filled the room. Not uncomfortable silence. Perfect silence. Lyra's eyes never left his. I know, she whispered, because I love you too. Outside the recovery center, the stars continued their endless journey across the cosmos. The warship had been defeated. The extremists had failed. The alliance survived. But for Ethan and Lyra, the greatest victory wasn't political. It wasn't military. It wasn't even historical. It was finding someone from another world who understood them completely. Someone who transformed the vast emptiness of the universe into something that felt like home. Months later, a new exploration vessel launched from the orbital shipyards above Avaris. Built jointly by humans and Vaelari, it represented a future neither civilization had believed possible. As the vessel departed into unknown space, Ethan stood beside Lyra on the bridge. Countless unexplored stars stretched before them, endless possibilities, endless adventures, endless mysteries. Ethan smiled. Think we'll ever run out of places to explore? Lyra smiled back. The universe is infinite. Ethan nodded. So that's a no. That is a no. Together they watched the stars grow brighter. Whatever waited ahead, they would face it together. And somewhere beyond the edge of known space, a new adventure was already beginning.